Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Liverpool, and the busy fixture piled up congestion of the Christmas and New Year period continues with a home game for Liverpool against Wolves. This was, I guess, a game based on our previous games against Wolves and how well they're doing. Was always going to be a very tough one. Obviously, we had some very close games with them last season. We played them on the last game of the season, actually, when we were trying to get that win to possibly give us a chance of winning the title. But obviously Wolves are a very, very good team, battling on the Europa League front and the Premier League front, with a very good manager and a very good team. So it was obviously going to be a tough game anyways. You added in the circumstances of Wolves obviously having played Man City just the other day, in what was a game that would have took a lot out of them, even though they were playing against 10 men, and that was reflected in the starting lineups from Wolves. They rested Adama Traore, Raul Jimenez and Doherty, arguably three of their best players, and after the game, kind of watching the game, it looked like a kind of game where both players could have probably done with the rest. I think now, in the last couple of years, as we got more foreign managers, I think they have been increasingly vocal about their discontent with the whole fixture schedule around this time of the year. They talk about having to get used to it and move on, but every year they seem to complain about it. And when you watch games like this, you kind of understand what they mean. Back before, maybe when the games weren't so in like physically intense as they are now, in terms of the pace of the game, maybe it was okay to play 40 hours later. But I think I'm with the managers on this one, where I'd rather have the fixtures kind of not so crammed together if it's going to be better football. This very much was a game where you could see both teams probably needed the rest, and which is why it was even more important for Liverpool to just get the win, get out of the game with any injuries, and just rest and recoup for a couple of days before we hit up Sheffield United again in the new year. But kind of dissimilar to Wolves, we went for a pretty full strength team. The back four has been the same back four that played at Leicester. Midfield was slightly different, one change being Lallana, and I'll touch a little later on in this episode about that position that he played, because it was something interesting that we haven't really seen before, and I think maybe Klopp used this game as kind of a little experiment, being at home against a team that were possibly tied and had made a few changes. But anyway, I'll touch on that later in the episode. And front three was the same, and I think that was testament to Wolves. I think Klopp felt like he had to put out a pretty strong team, otherwise we could have got beat. Wolves actually did create, arguably throughout the game, more chances than we did. They just weren't able to take them. Obviously, we'll come to the VAR discussions as well. But even in the second half, they had some good shots on Alisson's goal, whereas we didn't really create too much. And that was very much, the pattern set in the first half. We had a lot of the ball, but a lot of it was passing sideways. Wasn't as quick as we normally play. And as much as I think that maybe kind of us having a bit of an off day, I personally think that a lot of that is down to the tiredness and the fatigue in the players. Andy Robertson, for example, for me was a really, really good example of a player who just didn't look his normal self, and I think we resorted to a lot of give the ball to Trent on the right and see what happens. The first half was one of not many chances, but was ultimately decided, and which was actually, the whole game was actually decided probably on a 10-minute period just before half time. And our first goal from Sadio Mane, a great long ball. I won't call it a long ball. I was having a discussion with somebody the other week, and I think that's actually a long pass. And the reason I say that is because he's not lumping it forward in the hope that someone will get onto it. He's chipping the ball kind of longer, but with a full intention of picking someone out or picking a run out. And for me, that's a pass. That's not a long ball. And so it was a great pass from the back from Virgil van Dijk, and Lallana kind of controlled it, but also laid it off to Mane all in one motion. And Sadio Mane then was a couple of yards in, and was able to beat Rui Patricio. But obviously this went to VAR because the referee had blown his whistle. But the important thing, which I don't know if any of you guys picked up when watching it, was that the whistle was blown once the ball was in the net. and that was critical because if the referee had blown the whistle whilst the ball was still in play, then the goal wouldn't have been allowed because in that case, Wolves would claim, and I think the rules of the game state that then the ball becomes dead as soon as the referee blows his whistle. Whereas because the referee had blown his whistle after the ball went into the goal, the ball going into the goal was the ball going dead, which was why that goal was able to be given. But I think from looking at the VAR shots, it was definitely came off Adam Lallana's shoulder. It wasn't anywhere near his chest. It was right on that kind of bone as you get towards your shoulder, towards your collarbone. So that was definitely a right decision to be overturned, where VAR comes in clutch and does something really good for you. And I think you'll see this Liverpool stuff trending on Twitter and all this type of thing. But any supporter of any team would acknowledge that is. That came off his shoulder and is a valid goal. The second decision, which is the one that will probably be talked about most, I don't agree with. Obviously, as a Liverpool fan, I'm going to be biased towards Liverpool and things like that. But even in this situation, it was very, very cruel to see a goal chalked off because of a toenail, a heel, or whatever. Before we had VAR, it was always talked about, the advantages given to the striker. However, it seems now that the advantage is always given to the defender. We're chalking off, so many goals for offside. I don't know the stats off the top of my head about how many, goals have been ruled out because of offside, and very marginal offsides that is. I look at the Tottenham-Norwich game yesterday as well with the Timu Pukki one. I look at this one. And it just seems to be really irking all supporters of every club. Even Liverpool, we've been on the wrong side of offside decisions like that. The Aston Villa one with Firmino's armpit springs to mind. And I think the thing about it is, I think with the lines and where they have that dotted line up, I think they attempt to make it very scientific. However, it's not. They're using photos that. There's frame rate, so obviously you might not be getting the exact frame and all this type of stuff, and so therefore they are working on an estimation, but what they are trying to do is be incredibly specific with estimates, and I think that's where it all falls down a bit for me. But yeah, anyways, enough talk on VAR. I think we could probably sit here and talk a lot about VAR. But the second half, I think we controlled the game a lot better. Obviously, the game got a little bit tetchy towards the end when Adama Traore came on, when Raul Jimenez came on. As you would expect, Wolves had a bit of an onslaught onto us, but we coped with it pretty well. And yeah, towards the end of the game, everyone looked a bit fatigued. Like they couldn't probably wait to get into the dressing room, get changed, and get on that coach home. Which I don't blame them. As I said earlier, the fixture pile-up I think is a bit ridiculous. Obviously, as a fan, it's great, but it's almost being done at the expense of good football, which I personally don't agree with, and I'd much rather see better good football than tired players. But as I mentioned earlier, one thing I wanted to touch on was Lallana's position. So obviously before the game, when the team lineups came out, everyone expected Lallana to play that number 6 position, or the Fabinho position, as he has done a couple of times this season for us. But as the game started and as kind of things played out in the first 10ish minutes, it appeared that wasn't the case, and actually it would be Henderson who would be playing that kind of number 6 role, and Lallana was taking up this kind of right wing position, almost where Salah normally plays, with Salah going down the middle and then Firmino playing off him, kind of Firmino acting more as a midfielder rather than an attacker, and that was really interesting. I haven't really seen us kind of start a game like that. I've maybe seen us end a game like that as Salah comes more central and Firmino tries to link up the play, but yeah, it was interesting that we kind of set out playing that way, and I think maybe Klopp used this game as a bit of an experiment to try something different. I think as we go later on into the season, as we play teams obviously for the second time, and as we get further in the Champions League as well, I think maybe this is a tactic for us to just become a little less predictable, to offer up another way of playing. Because then, if that happens, then who's going to come and take Firmino, right? If Salah's occupying that kind of number 9 position as the main striker, if Firmino's then dropping deep, who's going to do that? Is that going to be their defensive midfielder? Well, if that happens, then okay. Well, what happens to Sadio Mane and Lallana, or that Lallana position that he was playing today? And then obviously you've still got Henderson and Wijnaldum in there as well. So I think it was something that maybe Klopp's been working with or toying with on the training ground, that was given a go against Wolves. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see it again this season in certain games when maybe we can't break the deadlock, or we just need something different to try and approach the game. But we definitely have a couple of players that can play in that position. Oxlade-Chamberlain, although he's injured at the moment, springs to mind as someone who definitely could play that position. Lallana, obviously, he played that position today. Shaqiri as well, coming in off his left foot. I wasn't sure he was on the bench there. I wasn't sure why. Maybe he's injured. Obviously, we had Harvey Elliott and stuff on the bench. I assume that if Shaqiri was fit, he would have been on the bench. But hopefully he'll be back soon. But yeah, so we got another clean sheet, kind of. It will, in the record books, count as a clean sheet, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. And I think the shout out to Klopp, as we do at the end of all the episodes, is to rest up and get ready to go again. Our next game is on the 2nd of January against Sheffield United. I'm recording this as they play Manchester City, so I think the score is 0-0 when I'm recording this. But obviously we know how difficult the game was for us. When we went to Sheffield earlier in the season, we only won because of a Dean Henderson howler, and so obviously it will be another tough game. But similar to the Wolves game, I think the players will still be fatigued, even though we've got like 4 days between this game and the Sheffield United game. So that should be tough. But then obviously straight after that we've got the FA Cup game as well. So yeah, there's no rest for the wicked, and as we continue on this. On this journey to try and break this duck in terms of winning the Premier League. We're now officially halfway through the Premier League as well, having played our 19th game against Wolves, and it's been perfect, right? As a fan, as Liverpool Football Club, there isn't anything more that you could want from this beginning part of the season. Obviously, the injuries probably is the only thing. I think if we had Fabinho playing and maybe one other centre-back to cover, I think we'd be in the ideal position. But, we've coped really, really well. And onwards and upwards into 2020. Hopefully we can continue. 2019 has been such a fantastic year for us, so hopefully 2020 can be the same for us. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll catch you again for a review of the Sheffield United game.